You're listening to the audio production of The Story of Jesus Continues, Audio Lectures, 17 Lessons on the Acts of the Apostles, by Douglas S. Huffman, published by Zondervan and read by the author. These audio lectures are a unique learning experience. Unlike a traditional audiobook's direct narration of a book's text, this production includes high-quality live recordings that cover the important points from each chapter, as well as relevant material from other sources.
Hi, my name is Doug Huffman, author of The Story of Jesus Continues, a survey of the Acts of the Apostles. In this brief video introduction, I'd like to describe this overall series and its potential usage, and along the way tell you a little bit about my approach to the New Testament book of Acts. The book known as the Acts of the Apostles, or simply Acts for short, is unique in the canon of the New Testament. There are 4 Gospels, 21 epistles, 13 ascribed to Paul, and 8 general letters, and 1 apocalypse, although it's worth noting that the book of Revelation also has several epistolary elements. But there's only 1 book of Acts. Particularly interesting about this observation is that the book of Acts comes from the same pen as one of the gospel authors, the Gospel of Luke. This author felt the need to keep writing. That is, while the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and John, cease their recounting of the story about Jesus with the resurrection, the author of Luke and Acts, or Luke Acts, as the corpus is often referenced, he felt the need to continue the story of Jesus for his readership. And we have no Acts according to Matthew, or Acts according to Mark, or Acts according to John. But as indicated in Acts 1, verse 1, this book is connected to its author's former book. In this sense, the New Testament book of Acts alone reads as a continuation of the Jesus story. The Gospel of Luke ends with the ascension of Jesus into heaven in Luke 24, verses 50 to 53, and Acts begins by repeating that report in Acts chapter 1, verses 9 to 11. So it is doubly clear that Jesus, in an important sense, is gone as the story continues. Nevertheless, the student discovers that the story remains about Jesus. That is, the name of Jesus occurs more than 60 times in Acts. And Jesus himself actually makes several in-person appearances and is still an actor in the story. Thus, even with Jesus in heaven, Acts remains a continuation of the story of Jesus. The author of the Acts of the Apostles, let's call him Luke, is an excellent storyteller, a conveyor of the true story of Jesus. But there is more to Luke's writing than merely a longer story of Jesus. While he could have written his volumes in a cultivated Greek style, he chose to write instead with a less formal but nevertheless an educated approach. Luke's style is actually reminiscent of the old Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible known as the Septuagint. So then, the story in Acts is not only a continuation of the story of Jesus, it's also a continuation of the story of the Hebrew Scriptures. Luke sees Jesus as the Messiah fulfilling God's plan in keeping with the Hebrew Scriptures, a plan that encompasses all of creation and invites the compliance of everyone. For Luke, the story of Jesus and his followers is a continuation of God's purposes in the world. Moreover, in another sense, the mission of the church is itself a continuation of the Jesus story. Grounded in the Hebrew Scriptures and in Jesus' own work, the ongoing mission of the church continues the scriptural story from God's promises to Abraham, through the ancient Israelites, to and through Jesus, to reach all of humanity. Jesus continues his ministry through his disciples in Acts and in the world today as well. So Luke's report about the spread of the gospel message in Acts calls his readers to participate in the spread of the gospel message in the world. The purpose of this series is to study the Acts of the Apostles not only as the result of God's mission in the world up to the time of the first century, and as a record of God's mission in the early church during the first century, but also as a resource for learning how God's mission can continue
Sample complete. Ready to continue?